Why, hello there. It's me, Jeremy, your favorite bald dude telling you about Standard and Strange, a store and a brand with simple rules. Sell clothes they themselves would wear, manufacture it ethically, and build it to last. From boots made in Oregon to loop wheel garments made in Japan, find all the best clothes for your wardrobe at Standard and Strange. StandardandStrange.com. Hey folks, it's Jeremy Kirkland. You're listening to Blammo. How are we doing? Well, we're doing it. We're doing it. We're here. Here we go. Okay. Gotta tell you, I'm in a great mood lately. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I'm just trying to keep all the vibes positive. I got my foot on the gas. I'm trying to walk a little taller. How many analogies do you want to talk about feeling good? I'm even getting into my spring fits. You guys getting ready for spring? The spring fits. Don't lie. I know you got your eyes on stuff. I'll tell you, I got some stuff tailored. I've been trying to hit the gym, getting bigger here, getting smaller here, whatever that is. But yeah, I've been going to the gym, getting clothes altered. It's fun. Especially because I have so much crap that as I try to purge and get rid of clothes, I'm finding stuff that I'm like, you know what? I wonder if I fit in this. And magical time at the tailor. Now I'm fitting in it. It's a new Jeremy. I'm doing it. I'm doing all the stuff. Just all positive vibes. On that note, my guest this week, Mr. Mike Nouveau. He's a vintage watch specialist. He's a dealer. I got a lot. It's a very hard to summarize guy because he's done everything. He's a real Renaissance man. Okay, and I don't use that term lightly. He's worked at Rolling Stone, he's worked at Paper Magazine, he's DJ'd around the world, and he is the titan and I would say the godfather of watch talk. But I want to pause for 1 second because there's a stigma around watch dealers or people in the watch industry, and let's just be honest. Sometimes it's a little slimy. It looks like a guy's opening his coat. What do you think of this? Mike is the polar opposite. I mean, his videos on TikTok and Instagram and stuff, they frequently show all the behind the scenes of what goes into buying and selling watches. And he's just a person that you're rooting for. I swear. We talk about this on the pod. I want this guy to get a TV show. I know there's some Netflix or whatever folks that listen to this. Find him. I can be junior producer. But he's great, and so I'm so glad to have him on the show. Mike and I discussed his life growing up in New York, his path into watches, blowing up on TikTok, why the market is obsessed with Cartier. Oh yeah, we really went there, and he explained it better than anyone. Collecting auction catalogs, legendary barn finds, and why the grails are still out there. Let's go. Anyway, Mike Nouveau.
Yes.
Is Mike Nouveau your real name?
For all intents and purposes, let's say it's my real name.
Okay, that's fair.
It's my professional name.
Your professional name.
Mm-hmm.
Damn, I want a professional name.
You could have one.
I just have I do have one. It's my real name and it's stupid.
You could just be Jeremy Kirk.
You know what? My secret name that I've done for things like bad message boards was Jason Karkland. Including the crack. Yeah, it was just like Jason Karkland. Or I would do, my coffee name would be Jay. Because people would be like, always get my name wrong, but I don't have a cool name.
People would get Jeremy wrong?
Yeah, at a coffee shop? Yeah. I mean, you'd say Jeremy and you'd get Jamie, Johnny, Jason, and I'd just be like Jay. Well, because it's loud in there. I mean, I tend to go to coffee shops where...
Yeah, I like more subdued coffee shops.
Yeah, I don't go to all the cool spots. Mine, I live in the suburbs now, Mike.
Oh, that's true.
It's just it's a loud Starbucks. And I'm a broken man. But anyway, yeah, thanks for coming on the pod.
Thanks for having me.
Bunch of stuff I want to talk to you about. Obviously, we'll talk about the watch dealing stuff, but I kind of want to get into some of the nitty gritty.
Sure.
Because we met not that long ago, but we had found out that we have like a bajillion overlapping friends.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised that it took so long for when we first met. I didn't know anything about you, and Cameron Barr from Craft and Taylor was like, you definitely know him. You have a million overlapping circles for, probably over 10 years. I'm like, I don't know if I do, but I'm typically, there's a lot of people like that people
You're on the scene.
Would have assumed that I knew or met that I, had no knowledge of whatsoever, that only now am I being like, wow, how did I never know this person? So yeah, we had a lot of crossover over for I guess the crossover would be for over 10 years, but we didn't meet
at
until
least.
last year, really.
Yeah, because I've known Karamonica for eons. I
I
mean,
didn't.
probably not as long as
No,
you,
I've
but
known
yeah,
him for less than I've known you. Yes,
that's crazy.
I only know him for a year.
Wait, how did you meet Karamonica then?
Through a mutual friend, not related to media or fashion in any way.
Okay.
It's
Do you guys have the same dealers?
no, nothing like that. Just through a mutual friend.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I do want to get into some of the DJ stuff because when when we had started to make connections of friends and stuff that we had, you and I were basically around the same scene a ton in the LES as a DJ.
Yes.
Me not as a DJ, me as a clown, but you as an actual DJ. Talk me through like some of your backstory because like where are you from originally?
So I'm from Nyack, New York, which is in Rockland County, which is not Long Island, and we don't call it upstate, but it's the southernmost county west of the Hudson in New York. So it's like
wow, that's specific.
I know, well, because every time I say it, someone's like, "Oh, that's Long Island." I say no. They're like, "Oh, it's upstate." Well, I'm like, "Well, if you're born and raised in Manhattan, you might call it upstate. However, it's the southernmost county west of the Hudson. It's only 20 miles away. It's on the Hudson. It's in the Hudson Valley. So I grew up coming to the city, to go skateboarding. As a later teen, to go to like clubs and bars and stuff like that, and kind of just participate in downtown nightlife from as soon as I could, because my town was basically like a commuter town. Like everybody's parents were from like Brooklyn or the Bronx, and
they all worked in the city or whatever.
Yeah, and me and everyone my age were kind of like the first generation. I mean, not in history of time, but it was a 1950s suburban town.
Oh yeah,
and that's
like a Mad Men town.
Yeah, basically where people left the city to move. So both my parents are from the Bronx, and their parents, on my dad's side, they're Polish. My mom's side's Italian.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So anyway, I grew up there. I grew up skateboarding. Skateboarding was like the most important part of my life for many, many years, and that's where I kind of made my core group of friends, and that extended to like punk and hardcore music. And just because we were so close to the city, that's where we would kind of go. And that original kind of group of friends, we first started coming to the East Village, basically, which is where I still live 20 years later. That original group, I can still kind of trace everything back to that in terms of like, into nightlife, into fashion, into watches, like it all goes back to, I could trace it back to basically skateboarding.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That I didn't even know you skated. It is crazy. Everyone I talk to, there's some, whether they were obsessed with it and really good at it, or they were just super into it and not good at it, like me. I mean, it's like this cultural upbringing. It's like I don't know. Yeah, that's crazy. So you were here, you were skating. Are you still close with your old friends?
Not so many of them. Basically, like none that I actually went to high school with, but I am close still with a few friends from my town.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, but I mean, really, probably not very many. There's a few. And there's a few that I was not really close with who, like, since we both ended up in downtown Manhattan, kind of like we'll talk on Instagram or Facebook or something. But the other weird thing about my town is how many people never leave the town despite it being so close to Manhattan. Like my sister has probably been to Manhattan like under 10 times, and we're from 20 miles away. Like it's just, there's a lot of people who just like, I don't want to call it a fear of the city, but just like they're comfortable and they're, and we're not talking about, rural country. This is like pure suburbs, New York metro area. But anyway, to answer your question, no, I don't see that many people from my hometown here.
Yeah, because that was the thing, is like, I feel like folks I know who grew up in the vicinity of New York or around there, you're just a lifer. It's in a way, it's like all of culture is right outside your door. So there's really not much of a reason to explore otherwise. Yeah. I mean, I definitely feel, especially since moving away, to where you're like, damn, like I had it so good, but you're like addicted to the stress.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I could ever leave Manhattan, to be honest. Like, I don't know if I'll likely die here. Like, I don't know where, for me, the only thing that like, if I'm bored here and you're like, damn, I'm bored. How could I be bored in the middle of downtown New York? The only place I think that is like above this is Tokyo, probably, in terms of just stuff going on and general craziness. Food, nightlife, fashion. Like I think that's the only thing that could potentially compete with New York.
Yeah, I mean Tokyo is like a big circus that's super efficient.
Yeah. Agreed.
So how did DJing stuff come in? So you're here, you're skating, you're hanging out. Is the natural, was the linear path from skateboarding to LPs?
Well, we'd go to a lot of like kind of like skater bars or whatever, and there was some crossover with, downtown early 2000s. There was crossover with music, and there's crossover with punk and
Yeah.
fashion.
Because
So
this is like
basically, if you,
Strokes era.
yeah,
Yeah.
basically, I mean, maybe even like a little, like
Yeah.
2003.
Okay.
So I know a lot of people do measure it by the Strokes. I was never a Strokes fan.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I liked Interpol. That was like the New York band I
Yeah.
liked. Strokes never did it for me. And I know people measure time in the Strokes. People like measure the New York City generation in the Strokes. But like for me, it was like I don't even know what year was the first album. Probably definitely before I got here.
2001.
Yeah, so that was like I was still in high school.
But also the same for Turn on the Bright Lights. Yeah, because
That's
I
true.
think we're about the same age. I mean, Turn on the Bright Lights was my Dark Side of the Moon in a lot of ways. Like
That was also
yeah.
an important album for me for sure. But again, I didn't care about the Strokes at all, but a lot of people did, obviously. So I kind of met people who were throwing. So the first, I guess, if you remember the motherfucker parties,
Yeah.
yeah. So that was
Yeah.
kind of like because those were going on for a long time, and those used to happen like I guess quarterly. Like they'd usually be like the night before like a major holiday. And I would come down well before I was 21 to like go to those parties. And that was kind of like my first experience with kind of like that aspect of nightlife where it was like very fashion. It was very mixed. It wasn't like all straight. It wasn't like all gay. It was like very, very blended. There'd be like punk rooms and there'd be like house rooms. And it was just like a very fun mix. And I'd never seen anything like that. So that was kind of my first look into that life. And then I found out that people were doing like much smaller versions of parties like that every single week, like at a different bar. Like every Thursday would be this bar. Every Monday would be this bar.
151 or whatever.
Yeah, I mean like bar 13 or Max Fish, Lit, Dark Room, Beauty Bar, stuff like there'd be a specific party every night of the week. I was like, wow, this is amazing. I cannot believe this goes on every single night with like, I mean, I knew nightlife was happening everywhere, but like this, it seemed like so niche. How could there be that many people that were into this stuff? Like I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
There was enough to fill bars at least every single night. And then I befriended some of the DJs. I befriended some of the promoters, and I saw that it was kind of easy that if you were able to bring a group somewhere, I mean, I think probably was like, hey, someone was probably like, if you can bring 20 people to this party on this night, we'll give you $200 cash. I'm like, oh my God, I would have done this for free. Like, this is amazing. And then kind of from there, I was like, let me see if I could throw my own party. So, I put together like a few one-off parties without me DJing. This is before I was even a DJ, and I was booking other DJs. And then after a few of those, and they did fine only because I promoted them like so heavily that they couldn't fail. I mean, we were literally like printing flyers and handing out flyers in Tompkins Square Park and Union Square. And then after that, I became much closer friends with a lot of the DJs I was booking, and I was watching them do this. Like we were DJing with CDs basically.
Yeah.
And I was like, I think I can do this because we're just playing the Clash and the Cure and the Smiths. Like I think I could probably figure this out. So one of the guys was like, yeah, come next week early and I'll show you how to do this. And, the barrier of entry was extraordinarily low. I think it was a very good time to start doing it. So I started doing it, and, that was it. I should also mention that at the same time, I had like a day job. I worked at Rolling Stone magazine in a very non-glamorous position because I have a friend from my hometown kind of like hardcore scene who had gone to school, which I hadn't. I hadn't gone to college, and he had gotten a job as like an advertising assistant at Rolling Stone. And I kind of like put together this plan in my head where if I could become his intern, then I would just stay there until they offered me a job without any school. So I asked, and he's like, I'm actually, I control, I hire all the interns for this department. So if you want to come intern, come here on this day, and, we'll hire you as an intern. You come in 2 or 3 days a week.
Yeah.
So I was driving into the city, and I was like parking at, in like Rockefeller Center. And if you got there before like 7 a.m., it was much cheaper. So I would get there, very early, park my car, and then intern for free, and then come home. And I was delivering pizza at home at that, in my hometown. I was delivering pizza for like the local pizza place that we kind of grew up going to while skateboarding, while going into the city at night to go to these clubs.
And wait, how old are you at this time?
Probably like 19 to 20 I was interning, and then my friend got a promotion at Rolling Stone, and I applied for his job. I remember I had really long hair, and I came in, they're like, okay, like you can apply, but it's going to be like a proper interview, even though you're already interning here. So I came in wearing a suit, which they had never seen me. And I cut my hair. I cut all my hair to like real proper length. And they were like amazed because they knew me as this hipster into super long hair. This intern. And I came in and I applied and they gave me the job. So I was like, damn, I just like skipped 4 years of college basically. They never even asked about college. Like I skipped like student loans. I skipped all of this just by having this friend like I knew through skateboarding and hardcore music. And so I worked there for 2 years. And at the same time, I'm DJing several nights a week and coming into work like a zombie. The other thing I haven't mentioned is I don't drink. I've never drank in my entire life. So that kind of, I guess, made things easier.
So never drank and never done anything?
Never. Nothing. Never even tried. Never started.
So wait, what?
I'm not religious.
Why is that?
I'm fully an atheist. I have no history of alcoholism in my family. I just never started. I don't really know why, because I got into plenty of trouble as a youth through skateboarding and other stuff. I just never started. I don't know why. People ask me all the time. They think I have like alcoholism, which I don't. I have no history in my family. I have no issues with it. So many of my friends are, in AA, etc. And a lot of people just assume I'm in recovery. I'm not. I've never drank in my entire life. That's another like funny little aspect.
Oh my God.
I know. So I'm doing all this sober. So I got the job at Rolling Stone. I had to move into the city. I had to move really quickly. And I got an apartment above Veneros on 11th Street with another kid from my hometown. We were roommates. We were paying like $1,400 for a 2-bedroom.
It's good. That's a nice area.
Yeah. I'm still very close to there. So at the same time, there's this party, the Misshapes, where I befriend everyone involved in that party, and they're still my close friends to this day. And I started, kind of DJing there fairly frequently, and that was very popular. That was like celebrities were going, like fashion designers. I was very into fashion. I just picked up this love of fashion. So I kind of, as a DJ, positioned myself in kind of the fashion world because that's what I was interested in.
Because is this like Luke and Leroy?
Yeah, Luke and Leroy, exactly. Before they moved to Don Hills. So I mean, that was a big party that I loved. Rough Club came a little bit later, if you remember Rough Club, which I was also a part of. And that was like very popular at the time. I was doing like a night at Lit. I was going to like DJ Jess's parties, who he passed away, but he was like he helped me out a lot in the beginning. So I was doing stuff like that. So I was DJing like 5 nights a week, these like very hip parties, and I still had to wake up and go to work the next day. So after 2 years at Rolling Stone, I moved to Paper Magazine, which was like a big cultural change.
Oh yeah.
Unfortunately, they had just moved.
Wait, cultural change, really?
Well, Rolling Stone was very corporate. And like towards the end, like everyone, there was like 100% turnover. There was like no one who was there when I was hired was there when I left. So I applied for a job at Paper. Unfortunately, Paper had just moved from Tribeca, like a legendary Tribeca office, to like Koreatown area. So everyone there, and then so I applied, whatever. I got the job. I moved over. I could wear whatever I wanted. I could wear like I was wearing wild outfits to work, which you couldn't do at Rolling Stone. It was much more fashion oriented.
That's so mind boggling to me. Like I feel like Rolling Stone has always been in my head like very punk rock. Do whatever you want.
Well, maybe in like 1975, but it's certainly not in not in the early 2000s. That's for sure. I mean, they would put like U2 on the cover and Bob Dylan on the cover at least once per year, and the Rolling Stones. Like, so that was 3 covers a year already. Like, for these irrelevant musicians in the early 2000s. So I went to work at Paper. Everyone in the office was complaining about how they had to come to Koreatown now, because for years the office was in Tribeca. Right when I kind of got hired is when the office had just moved to Koreatown, which is a lot less interesting back then than it is today.
Right.
So I was like, this is great. I get to be like so much closer to downtown, because I was in Rockefeller Center before that. And, I worked there for 2 years. It was cool. I got to do a lot more fashion stuff. And also during that time is when I went to Paris for the first time. I saved up. I had never gone on a vacation since I started working, period. So I'd never been anywhere. Had gone to London once, like right after high school. That's it. And so I saved up all my vacation days that I had. And I took this trip over 4th of July. So that gave me even more days off. And I went to Paris for like 2 weeks, and I stayed on the couch of a friend's cousin that I had never met, because I was like, I was very into fashion, very into nightlife. I really wanted to go. I had like dreams of going. So I went. I didn't DJ anything. I was just there on vacation, and I was just like blown away. I was like obsessed with it from the first time I ever went. And I came back to New York, and I got laid off. It was 2008.
Oh,
I got laid off.
Fuck.
And all of my friends who were kind of like bigger, more established DJs, they were all going back to Paris like that following September for Fashion Week. And I really wanted to go, but I didn't want to book myself. I didn't want to be like,
Right.
all these people were getting flown out. All these people were being put up in hotels, getting paid. I really, really, really wanted to be a part of it. I really wanted to go back to Paris. But I didn't want to pay my own way. It just felt corny kind of.
Yeah. No, I know the feeling.
Yeah, so I just bit the bullet and I'm like, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to go, I'm going to make connections. I'm going to treat it like a vacation. And I went and I think I DJ'd one thing or two things, small things for probably no money just to like make connections. I met people, and from after that, I don't think I missed a single Paris Fashion Week for the next decade. I was in like, yeah, like London, Milan, Paris. We would do Copenhagen. We would do Stockholm, Amsterdam Fashion Week. Basically from then on, like it was a worthy investment, me just like biting the bullet and paying for my own flights and stuff like that, to basically DJ for free. Because from then on, for the next 10 years, basically I was there, 4 to 6 times a year, which was like a dream. I never traveled growing up ever really. And now I was able to because I had to make this decision when I got laid off. Do I try to get like another real job, or do I focus on this? And yeah, that's basically was the start of really taking DJing more seriously. I have to say, not the art of DJing very seriously, but just the business of DJing, taking it very seriously. Because again, we were still just playing like the Clash and the Cure and the Smiths at that point. That's basically what we were playing.
Yeah. Well, wait, who's we?
So I'd say like me, the kids I DJ'd with at Rough Club, Misshapes,
Okay.
who else was? Yeah, Jordan Lee, all those people. Yeah, who else was I DJing with regularly? God, I can't remember.
Well, who's booking? Like who's handling your booking? Because it sounds like this is kind of
a lot of credit goes to Tommy Soleil. If you know Tommy, and if anyone out there probably knows Tommy, he was like a legendary downtown New York figure, and he worked for the Tribeca Grand and Soho Grand hotels, and they had this. Had this like a marketing arm called Grand Life, and they were like the only New York entities throwing parties in other cities' fashion weeks. And they had a big budget because it was these 2 big popular hotels. So they would fly us. They were the ones usually covering all the flights, and then putting us up. Maybe we got a giant Airbnb, maybe we got a hotel, putting a bunch of us up, and kind of that was the flight in. And once I was there, I could book other gigs myself, where those gigs wouldn't have to worry about flying me in. So that was that was like our kind of cash cow for a long time. Soho Grand and Tribeca Grand hotels. So they were kind of the ones, and really because of Tommy, who was like old, significantly older than us. He was like the creative director of these 2 hotels, and he kind of like adopted us all. And we would throw these parties all over all the fashion weeks. Yeah.
And what's the fashion you're into at the time? Because you were saying that you were more and more into fashion.
Is
this the Rick Owens era?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I was into. Let me think. I'm trying to like put the year. I mean, I remember one of my first Paris fashion weeks. I bought my first Rick Owens leather jacket, which was like the pinnacle of fashion at the time. And for anyone, it was a much smaller brand back then. There was no New York store. There was one store in Palais Royal in Paris, and that was it. And going there was like going to Mecca. And I remember I tried this jacket on. It was amazing. I probably went back every other day that I was in Paris and tried it on, like wondering if I should pull the trigger. Meanwhile, I had just been like kind of laid off, like probably the same year. And on the day of my flight home, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to go get it. And I went and I put it on like 2 credit cards, a debit card, and like cash, like to buy this jacket. It was definitely the most expensive thing I'd ever purchased. And I like wore the hell out of it. So yeah, I was very into Rick for many years. Comme des Garçons, Junior Watanabe. That's kind of like this era. From there, I think that must have been like Style Zeitgeist era. So I was I was a big poster on Style Zeitgeist from the beginning. And that's how I know Eugene for many years and all those like old SZ people. So I was definitely wearing all the Japanese brands, Rick, Damir Doma, Boris, both of whom also grew up skateboarding. Damir and Boris both grew up as skateboarders, and skateboarding was like a big influence on their early designs. So Andy Millimeter, what else was I wearing? Some brands, some smaller brands, like Carpe Diem, stuff like that. Augusta, Carol Christian Pole, when I could afford it. Then it got into Paul Harnden. I was wearing nothing but Paul Harnden for like 8 years, basically.
Wow. These are all like real head brands. This isn't like, oh, I was into Dior and,
Dior Homme was very important in like, I'd say like the Misshapes days. But I couldn't afford much of it. I had like a pair of the Dior jeans, a few tops, stuff you could find like on the Super Future Market or whatever.
Yeah, because I feel like Dior and Helmet.
Yeah, Helmet
were like when I had first moved to to New York, that was the stuff that you could like, that even other New Yorkers were like, wow, this is really
For sure.
expensive.
And Cloak as well. Cloak was an important one if you remember Cloak.
Yeah, with Geller. Yeah. Or in
Alexander Plokov,
too. Yeah. That was like such a great era. Like looking back now, like I feel like I was so unaware that I was in this like prime, because you were very connected because you had the internet, but you didn't, for me, like I would check MySpace and see what was happening, or I would check, I don't know, who was it? Was it like Ultra Girl, and some of the folks
Sarah.
who had blogs where it was like, hey, these are the parties, these are the things that are happening.
There was a lot of websites like that. There was a lot of documentation of these parties, even Gawker. And Gawker in the early 2000s was like a real powerhouse. And they had this column every Friday called Blue States Lose that my friend Joe used to write. And he would take like the top 5 like craziest photos he could find from either the Cobra Snake or lastnightsparty.com, both of which were like revelations when someone figured out like they should be documenting all these parties. So like Mark Hunter and Bronx, like at all the parties, you knew you were at a good party if they were there, and then you knew the next day you could go online and see photos of yourself, which was like a big deal before Instagram and stuff like that. So Gawker would like find the top 5 like wackiest photos and kind of do a Vice style do's and don'ts, like kind of like a real like trolling caption on each one.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, and all the entire New York media world was reading Gawker. Gawker was extraordinarily powerful back then. They were like the top. And, I was working for Rolling Stone, Winter Media, and every time they got mentioned, which was like every day, it would be like a little bit of drama in the office.
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
So have you always kind of been this like Renaissance man, for lack of a better term? Because it sounds like a lot of these things, you didn't have formal training.
Right.
You didn't, which is fine. I mean, because I didn't go to school either.
Yeah.
Like I moved to New York.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I'm going to take some time off and play music. And, here I am, almost 38 years old and never have gone to school.
Same.
And in a weird way, it's great because I learned how to learn and I learned how to be a professional. But in other ways, like, I mean, in like the darkest days of my life, I would be like, oh man, like I'm going to apply at this place, but it says, where'd you go to school?
Right.
I can't write in New York and hope they think NYU or something like, but you were just figuring out your life on the go.
Yeah,
like, what'd your folks think?
Yeah, I think I was just always able to do that. I mean, I was delivering pizza in my hometown, making good money because this was the pizza place everybody went to. And this was the pizza place we grew up with. So this was like the go-to pizza place. And I was delivering, like I had like the 2 prime shifts, like delivering Friday and Saturday night. Like I could make like, I mean, early 2000s, $200 or $300 as like a 17-year-old cash. Like that was like, huge. That was humongous. I felt like I was rich. So yeah. And then from there, I don't know. I just kind of saw this path. I was living at home.
That's very much not a path. I mean, to call it out.
Well,
like it's not, you just made it.
Yeah. I mean, I was never a worker. I was never like a hard worker. Like I hated school from day one. Like from preschool on, I hated school. Even summer camp. I hated summer camp because it felt like school. I never went to sleepaway camp. My parents knew I hated summer camp.
Summer camp is school.
Yeah, I never was into it ever. So like, I don't know, even my parents didn't go to school. So it was like, for them, it was important that I go to school. And even before like SATs, they knew like, okay, he doesn't care at all. Like there's no way, there's no point in like SAT prep or anything like that. I don't even know what I got on my SATs. I don't think I did 1 minute of prep. I couldn't even tell you what I got I don't even remember taking them. I was never applying to schools when other people were applying. I just like had no interest. It wasn't even a concern. Yeah. And I think like living in Manhattan with 0 degree will get you way further than living anywhere else with like a master's degree.
It's a very astute point. Like I totally agree with that. Because it also, I mean, but you still have to do stuff. Because I have a bunch of friends who, they went to MIT or they went to Harvard or they went to wherever, and they're kind of just waiting for someone to recognize them in a sense where it's like, well, I applied. And it's like, well, cool. Have you talked to anyone? Have you done anything? Do you actually care about this? Like, are you going out? Are you meeting people? Are you like existing? And, and they're like, no, I mean, I went to the school. I reached out to the placement program and hopefully, and it's just like, what the fuck, man? Like, you have to exist. And I mean, hustle is such a fucking tacky term, but yeah, it was what you had to do. Attention! Do you even loop wheel, bro? Do you know what loop wheel garments are? Look, I actually didn't, honestly. I was just like, oh, it's a flex or it's this special kind of cotton. But no. The folks at Standard & Strange dropped a ton of incredible knowledge bombs and their incredible Loop Wheel tee, made in Japan, of course. Back to Loop Wheel. It's an antique circular knitting machine that relies on gravity and uses spring-bearded needles. What the heck? Do you even get it? Look, all you need to know is it's dope. It's better if you want to learn more. Visit standardandstrange.com/loopwheel and check out their new loop wheel tees. Your boy is partial to yellow because, duh. But the tees are fire no matter what color. The fit is spot on, and it's a classic tee that looks like it's from every era, to be honest with you, and fits like a dream. And it's from the folks at Standard and Strange, the shop that helps you own fewer, better things, run by industry vets who are focused on incredible product from incredible vendors. And look, if that's not your vibe, check out some of their huge offerings of Japanese denim or boots. But listen, the shirts, fam, the shirts. So, if you want to know more, visit standardandstrange.com. Loop wheel, baby. That's standardandstrange.com. So you do this for like a good decade.
Basically, yeah. And I didn't know where it was going to lead me because I was very aware that as a DJ, there were certain years where you make less money than the year before, and you weren't necessarily like, you don't get a raise every year. I mean, this is the same for anyone who works for themselves, I guess, but it was very clear. I remember when I was like 25 years, I don't know, how old was I? I was in my early 20s, I guess. We were doing Rough Club, and the two guys who like organized Rough Club, Denny and Spencer, were like both 30. And I was like, if I'm 30 and I'm still doing this, put a bullet in my head. I was like, there's no way I'm still going to be doing this at 30. And meanwhile, like 30 came and went, and I was definitely still doing it. So yeah, I didn't know what the plan was. And I don't know how far you want to skip ahead, but basically the last thing I did in nightlife was I helped my friend Angelo open a club for Tao Group, which was Fleur Room.
It's huge.
Yeah, so he had to kind of Angelo kind of had to talk me into it because I would be DJing, but I would also be booking other DJs and like working the door and planning events and doing all sorts of stuff. And he, kind of talked me into like being like, this could be like a next step instead of like DJing like some of your colleagues who are still like approaching late 30s, still doing this. You might want to like look for something else, like, kind of look to see what the future would be. So we started doing that like exactly 1 year before COVID. And yeah, and then COVID hit and it closed. Luckily, I mean, I don't know if this is skipping ahead too much, but
no, you're fine.
Kind of what we haven't talked about is the watches. Like I started collecting watches.
Because when did watches come in?
So basically through Style Zeitgeist, there was a guy on there who I would chat with, who was very into vintage Rolex, and he would talk about it with me and show it to me, and I didn't know much about it. And I kind of got interested. I started researching Rolex forums, vintage Rolex forums, etc. Instagram, and I was like, okay, maybe I want to like look into getting one. They were still, you can get a GMT for like a 60s GMT for under 10 grand. So eventually I bought my first one after like so much research. I did like a ridiculous amount of research, where I felt like I was nearly an expert on like the 60s GMTs, 60s and 70s, like reference 1675, if anyone knows what that is. So I did enough research where I like didn't need anyone to tell me if this watch was good or not. Like I was able to determine it like just from my own obsessive research. And I bought one, and that started like my obsession, and just tons and tons and tons of research. And I didn't even see myself buying more than one. But I would kind of stumble upon kind of really good deals on watches that I didn't necessarily want, but I knew somebody would want. So, I like dipped my toes into kind of like maybe attempting to buy and sell. And then I also stumbled upon a deal where this retiring watchmaker was selling all his parts, like all his Rolex parts, because he was like a certified Rolex watchmaker, like an independent watchmaker, but had a Rolex parts account, and he was retiring. I mean, this is almost like a legend. Like the story itself is like the dream you hear about, like, oh, I discovered like this retiring watchmaker, and he had like, the dream is you find one who has like 2000 Patek dials or something. In reality, I found this guy. He had a bunch of like 80s and 90s Rolex stuff that had some value. I offered him 10 grand. He said, okay. Like
Wait, where'd you get 10 grand?
Basically, I knew I basically had a buyer lined up before I even, so I had all the photos. I had like a bunch of photos. I mean, I was able to, at that point, like I was able to, it was like a guaranteed return. There was no fail. There was no way for this to go wrong. So I was able to, front whatever was 10 grand. And then like the same week, I think I sold it for 35 grand. Yeah, this is
Whoa.
way before I'm like even a dealer or anything like that. I just saw, I mean, it was very clear to me that in these photos, there were dials that sold for $2,000. There were bezels that sold for, a few $1,000s. What's funny is, I went to go pick all this stuff up. I brought 2 like international travel full suitcases, like empty on an Amtrak. And I went to go pick up all these parts. And the guy told me, he's like, you know what? If I had like met you a year earlier, I had like an entire set, like a styrofoam large 7-Eleven cup, like a slushy cup filled with old inserts from like the 50s, 60s, 70s that I would take off people's watches and throw them into this cup and put the new inserts on and give the watches back. I was like, but you know what? I gave it to someone a year ago. I was like, oh my God, that could have been a $500,000 cup.
Yeah. Holy shit.
So,
how'd you find this guy? I mean,
I found him on Rolex forums. It was a guy.
Okay.
It's really funny. He posted in the complete to sell something on Rolex forums. I think you have to pay $50 a year. You have to have a certain amount of posts. Yeah. There's a special classified section. This guy went into just the general Rolex forum area, put this message against the rules in the wrong section. He's like, I'm a retiring watchmaker. I want to sell everything I have. Here's my phone number. And then like I saw it, I copied down the phone number. A second later, it was deleted by moderators. I mean, it was like posting the wrong thing in the wrong spot against the rules. He hadn't paid to be able to post.
Yeah.
So I call this guy and I was able to Google him, Google the phone number even, and it all checked out. He wanted an offer. I wasn't sure what to offer. I didn't want to, I really didn't know. The photos he sent me were not great. So I wasn't like 100 at that point. I wasn't 100% sure until I was able to get better photos. And we did the deal. I gave him exactly what he asked for. And then, he had no interest in breaking the parts down and selling them individually, posted in Rolex forums, and I found him. And then, I sold all those parts. And, it wasn't until like 2 years after that I even consider calling myself a dealer. But I would kind of stumble upon these deals. And, I remember like in 2005 or 2006, some store was closing down and they sold APC jeans, and they had all like the Cure, the new standard jeans. And because they were closing, they were selling them for $20 each. I went in and I bought this was like APC in the early 2000s, like spending $160 on jeans was like insane. And like everyone was looking for a way to get these jeans for cheaper. And they were selling, they were small sizes. These were not sizes I was going to be able to fit into. They were like size 25, 26, 27, 28. And I was like, I'll buy them all. And I bought them and I put them on Super Future. I think they were gone in like a day. So I was always like finding kind of deals like this. And then I would just keep finding stuff like this. I was just hunting all day, just like sitting on the internet, like on the message boards, on the Facebook groups, kind of finding these deals on watches. And in the meantime, I'm learning one reference at a time as much as I can, 1675, 1680, 5513, 6263. You learn them one at a time because, people now ask me, oh, how do you learn about this? How do you become a dealer? I tell them, study watches for 5 years. Study watches, like give yourself like a university education on watches, and then you're going to be able to make money whether you like it or not. Because like I'm constantly falling into these deals now, especially. But even back then, as like a total amateur, I was, knowing what I knew about 10 different references, I was able to find like incredible deals. And like you said, like the whole hustle culture thing, I think is pathetic. I also think like I have this bad habit of like turning my hobbies into jobs, which I know like sometimes works out.
How is that a bad habit?
I don't know. I just think it's like, why do you have to monetize everything? Why does everything have to be like a money-making opportunity? But I have like...
Well, because you have to live.
Unfortunately, yes, I guess
there's
so.
your defense.
Yeah. But yeah, so basically I was doing that for a while. I stumbled into like a huge deal where like I needed like money because I basically made this deal to buy this watch with no money, but I knew it was such an insane deal that anyone would give me the money. And the first person I spoke to, who was Cameron at Craft and Taylor, was like, go get this watch, which I had to get on a plane to go get, and we will wire the money. Like that's what a sure thing. It was a gold Patek Nautilus 3700 from like the 80s. It was like the original Nautilus in gold. It was so fully linked that I could basically slide the entire thing off without unbuckling the clasp. That's how like fully linked this thing was. It had like the lacquer box, not the cork box, but lacquer box. And it was just like it was just like a Facebook post with like the worst photos ever. And I literally, I was still doing nightlife stuff at this time. And I found this watch and I basically made a deal to get this watch without having any money. And then the first guy I called, who was Cameron, was like, yeah, we'll wire the money, go get it. And that's what happened.
That's nuts.
And then Cameron was basically like, we can do this. We can keep doing this deal. It doesn't have to be for like museum worthy watches. We could do this for smaller watches too, as long as there's enough profit margin for everybody. Then you find them, we'll sell them, we'll pay for them, etc. So that's kind of like how it started. And I was doing that casually for a while. And then COVID hit. I was like, I guess I'm just going to do this full time because vintage watches really went crazy after COVID. And it wasn't until like Adam Golden at Meant to Watch, it was like, I didn't call myself a dealer. And he goes, no, you're a dealer now, whether you like it or not. I was like, okay, so I guess I'm a dealer. And that's how that happened.
Yeah, because then the other thing that starts to happen through here, and this is what I'm sure a lot of people want to hear about, is the TikTok starts. And like I've told you this privately, but like I'll just say it publicly. Like the way that you do TikTok, like let me just say as an aside, I think watch stealing in most cases, it can look really glamorous or it looks extremely slimy.
Yes.
It looks like some sort of thing where it's like, I'm here just defrauding and deceiving individuals, and with my wit and intelligence, I win the game, and all these people are fools. And and with the TikTok that you were doing, first off, I will go on record, like you definitely created like watch talk, for lack of a better term. I don't know what the fuck people are calling it.
Yeah, we call it watch talk basically.
Yeah. And you were doing the kind of man on the street stuff, but then you started teaching people about things, and then documenting you buying watches, flipping watches. But the thing that was really interesting is even then, like, you have a bunch of videos of like, hey, here's a quick flip. Someone wants this watch. They want to move it at this. Like, there's no hiding. And because of, I don't know, maybe it's just because of how you talk to people or what, like it's not slimy. It looks like, I mean, in a weird way, it looks like fucking the best TV show. Like,
thank you.
It looks like Pawn Stars. Like, and I say that because I think I will go on record, and I've said this before too. Pawn Stars is by far one of the greatest TV shows of all time.
It is good.
Like, I swear to God, it's just the fucking best. But so you started doing this, and it's been incredible. Just like watch, and for folks that are listening, Mike and I were in New York, and we were walking around, and people kept coming up to us and being like, "Oh, dude, are you the guy from TikTok? Are you Mike?" Or like random people were like, "Yo, man, I love your videos." Like, we were just sitting at that cafe and just like that woman come. I mean, like, so it just exploded. And the question I want to ask was like, what made you be like, hey, why don't I start letting people in on the things that every other dealer hides?
So basically, I mean, what's funny is I've only been doing this TikTok since May, and it still feels funny to talk about it because it does. Since May of this year, May 2022 rather. And it still does feel weird telling people about TikTok because I'm like got to be the oldest person on TikTok. I'm like an old man in like a young person's app. But yeah, I started it because I had a lot of my friend Isaac was big on TikTok, or is big on TikTok, and he was like pushing me to do stuff. My friends,
Isaac likes.
Yeah, my friend Bailey and Nolan were doing a lot of stuff like fashion, watch or related stuff on TikTok. And I was like, I came up with an idea, and it was, I'm going to ask people on the street about their watches. And the very first one I did, like kind of popped off like a couple 100,000 views, where like all of these other, like Isaac and all of them were like, those are actually crazy numbers. Don't get used to this. Like, this is like how TikTok gets you. They reward you at the very beginning, and then they kind of like slowly take all your views away, which is true. But I was doing that. And within I wasn't planning on ever putting myself on camera. I was just interviewing people on the streets, and within a week, people were like, well, how do I buy vintage watches? How do I know vintage watches are good? Which dealers should I talk to? I was like, oh God, I'm gonna have to tell them I'm a dealer, because I wasn't gonna do anything dealer related, because I wanted it to be like completely unbiased, thoughts and opinions about watches, buying watches, collecting watches. So I had to get in front of the camera and be like, okay, I'm a dealer. This is how this works. Like, this is what we do. You don't have to buy. I never give people I don't care if they buy from me or not. Like, I never give people the hard sell. I think even my biggest critics will not accuse me of like being like, yeah, you have to come to us to buy watches. We're the best. I'm constantly recommending other dealers, other places to find watches besides just us, Craft and Tailored. So yeah, I just started doing these videos, and they were doing good. There wasn't much watch content on TikTok. So it kind of just like popped off from there. And, if you post every single day, like I do, and, keep making content, eventually it's going to kind of do well. And it's opened like an insane market that like was relatively untapped. Like, I've had dealers, like real dealers call me and be like, this is TikTok thing, like, does this really do anything for business? And I tell them, like, you wouldn't believe me if I told you. Like, if you saw like the number of within 2 weeks, someone had sent me a message being like, hey Mike, me and my dad, my grandfather collect watches. We had these like 50 watches that like they're all like collector grade, which they were watches, no crap. Do you want to come take them and sell them? And he gave me my address. I went to his apartment in Chelsea, and he had like 10 GMTs, like a bunch of subs, like Minervas, like like Ben Russ, all this stuff. I'm like, this is amazing. I've been doing this for 2 weeks, and this, like, the potential profit here is pretty, like, pretty wild. And that was so early on. And what was in this gentleman's collection that he wasn't selling was also like Paul Newman's, Stone Dials, James Bond sub. Like, I'm like, yeah, if we do well with this stuff, maybe we can eventually get that stuff. Anyway, and then people messaging me to buy watches. Like, the watches sell before we can even get them onto the website. I think one of the reasons I'm not like a hard sell is because the watches we buy and sell, they sell themselves. There's no like real marketing necessary. Like, if you're only buying and selling collector grade watches, the collectors are going to consume them. So really the hard part is, this is I'd say for all dealers, the hard part is finding and buying the watches. And TikTok has like kind of made that easier, because now kids are messaging me, I have this Patek Philippe my grandfather left me. Like, is it worth anything? Like, can we sell it? Like, can you consign it? So that is by far the best part. That's the reason why there hasn't been any sponsored content on my page at all. I mean, companies have approached me, like, eBay, who else? Bezel, Real, and I've given them kind of crazy numbers for a sponsored post, because I don't need that on my page. Like, I think people trust me enough to come to me like with their watches, and that's like the best thing that could ever happen. Like, I don't need the X amount of money that Warner Brothers offered for a sponsored post. Like, the prices I'm quoting for sponsored posts are like probably what people with 5 million followers should be quoting. But yeah, I mean, really the best part of the entire situation is people coming to you with their watches, because that's the hardest part of the whole business, is finding the watches.
Yeah, I mean, for years, so many people have always been like, oh man, because of Hodinkee or because of this, there's no more like desk drawer finds.
Right.
Like, it's over. And I think TikTok has brought out a whole new generation of people who are finding those things. Like, even then, like, there's a guy in St. Louis whom, I used to like teach him guitar and stuff back in the day. And since I moved back here, we met and hung out. I told you this a little bit briefly. And he was like, oh yeah, he's like, you're into watches, right? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, yeah, my dad collects watches. He's like, he only collects like Dutch stuff. And I was like, oh, like Dutch? I'm thinking like Renfeld? Is it like, what, And he's like, no, he's like something called like Patek. And I was like, Patek. And I was like, I was like, oh, Patek? And he was like, yeah. And his dad's got like 5970. Wow. His dad's got like, I mean, all these just incredible watches. And, his family does like art dealing and stuff. So like, he's been around this stuff. And even then, like, I met his dad, totally disconnected from the watch stuff. And I think that's the thing, is like, there's so many folks out there to where they just had the watch because it was a watch that they bought.
Totally.
Like, oh, it was a nice watch, or my wife bought it. So many people have not, out of respect, I assume, have not stayed abreast of just like the craze and all these people going and learning about it. And that's like just a random dude, I mean, so there's still tons of stuff out there.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. Like, I think before TikTok, I would have said the same thing, where there's so few barn finds, there's so few original owner watches left that are kind of untouched. Now, I mean, really, like, amazing stuff comes out of the woodwork every day. And I mean, and also the stuff sells very quickly. Like, if I pick up a bunch of watches and put them on my TikTok, generally they're sold before they're even a chance to be properly photographed, because I think people trust me enough to know that I'm not going to be like peddling crap. And also we stand behind all the watches we sell.
Yeah, but I think that's the biggest thing, is because I think your TikTok and you as an individual, you've documented so many things that you don't take, and so many things, like, even then, like, on some of your stuff, which I'm sure people will see after this or have already seen, where someone's trying to sell you a watch, or someone in the Diamond District or whatever, and you're like, no, you're like, I can't use these parts, or I can't use this. Like, people have gotten to understand that you're only buying stuff that doesn't require like authentication or replacing the hands or changing and so that, yeah, there's I imagine it's got to help reduce the amount of questioning you get before each watch is sold.
Yeah. Also, I mean, I post some content from the Diamond District, and people are like, how come I can't just go to the Diamond District and get these same deals you're getting? Well, I say, because, what you don't see is the fact that a lot of these people are offering me 100 watches, and 1 out of the 100 is good. 1 is all correct. 1 doesn't have its serial number filed off. 1 is not reloomed. 1 is unpolished. Like, only 1 out of 100 are we taking, and they are happy to sell the other 99 to whatever schmuck walks in off the street.
Yeah, because I was going to say, why everyone, if it feels like it's common in the lexicon or whatever for people wanting a watch that the dial is untouched, it's not reloomed, the hands aren't replaced, it's not polished. Yet still, a lot of these places that are selling, vintage Rolex, for example, it's all renewed. It's all over polished. It's all replacement everything. Why have this? Where's the disconnect?
I think people might say, "Hey, I want a vintage watch. I'm going to go buy it. This guy's in business. He has a booth. He must be trustworthy." And they
Yeah.
don't. They just simply don't do the research. I mean, it's a lot. Starting from zero, it's a lot to learn. Which is why I always advise going to like a legitimate vintage dealer, like a vetted vintage dealer. And I literally every so often I'll make a video where I list 20 dealers besides myself that I completely vouch for. So when people ask, "Where do I buy vintage watches? Like, how do I know I'm not getting screwed?" Go to one of these 20 people I just listed and go to their websites or their Instagrams, and they're trustworthy, and they're going to, if there's anything replaced, it'll be disclosed at least. And if
Yeah.
something goes wrong, they'll be there to, take it back or fix it. I think a lot of people, the other thing I've learned, especially with TikTok, because it's a younger demographic, is that like they want the cheapest thing possible. They want like,
Yeah.
I cannot tell you every question.
Rolex for under 1,000.
Yeah, what's
or
the
under
cheapest
500.
Rolex I can get? What's the cheapest Cartier I can get? I'm like, that's the worst way to do this. You are like nearly guaranteed to be screwed if that's the way you plan on doing this. So people are just think they find a cheap deal. And the other thing is, I think maybe someone will buy a watch from, who knows, either a mom and pop jewelry store who can be just as slimy as anybody else. These mom and pop shops. Like if someone says something's come from a mom and pop shop, or their local mom and pop shop has verified their watch is authentic, that is a big red flag for me, because I don't trust any of those shops. Many times they're lying by omission, or they know, or they pretend they don't know. There's only a handful of people. I mean, I don't know, in the entire world, I don't know what the number is, 250 people that can truly kind of like, I trust to authenticate something. And it's not like someone at a mom and pop shop, like in the middle of nowhere. I mean, yes, somebody might walk into that shop, trade them like a really valuable untouched watch, but generally what you're finding in places like this, I find, are place dials, aftermarket stuff, blah, blah, blah. And they probably are not going to disclose it. They're just going to sell it. Anyway, what I was getting to is somebody might buy a watch from a place like that, walk around wearing it for 10 years, recommend this store to everyone who asks. Then it comes time to sell it. They want to sell it to us. We're not in the business of telling people their watches are no good. But if you're trying to sell it to us and negotiate, and you're wondering why, that not only do we not have an offer, but we're not interested in buying it at any price, we're going to tell you why, that all this stuff is incorrect. And you didn't know that until just now. And you've been referring your friends and family to the same seller for the last 10 years. And I think that's how this, perpetuates.
Yeah, that's a good point. It makes me wonder, like, all the people who bought like messed up Bamfords over the years, and they think it's worth, like, I had a friend, he managed a bunch of DJs actually. He managed
condolences to him.
He managed Darude at one point, and he was super into, he's like, Jeremy's like, I want to get a Rolex. And I'm like, okay, cool. And I was like, I knew enough to still be an idiot, but I was like kind of dangerous. And so he was like, I want to get a Milgauss. He's like, but I want to get the blacked out. So he bought a Bamford Milgauss. This is before George Bamford, shut down his like customizing program and all that. I mean, this is a long time ago. And he got this Milgauss, and he got it all blacked out. And in my opinion, I mean, he's probably going to listen to this and message me and cuss me out, but like, it's the ugliest watch I've ever seen. Because the Milgauss is already super big.
Yeah, I already find the regular factory Milgauss extremely ugly.
Yeah, it's a trash watch. He wanted the lightning bolt because he thought it was cool. But here's the other thing. He went and he was on tour with one of his DJs, and he got the hands all replaced. And then again, he went and got someone where they like wrote some sort of saying on the dial. So this guy basically has the brick watch before brick watches. And it's in now, he's like, Jeremy, he's like, I want to sell this watch. This is literally less than 2 weeks ago. He's like, do you remember that blacked out? It's a Bamford. It's super good. He's like, Bamford's like huge right now. And he's like, how much do you think this thing is worth? And I was like, did anyone own it? Like, is it cool? It was like, this watch is, it's trash. I mean, who wants a PVD Milgauss that has replacement hands and talks about like a DJ's inside joke on the dial? Like, it's over. And he was infuriated. He's like, this thing's worth like maybe 100,000.
Oh yeah, this happens all the time. All the time. People have no idea. Even with legitimate watches, I mean, people think that the price they see on Chrono 24 is the price that they're going to get. That's never going to happen. And it's people will come to me with a watch that we're not interested in and be like, okay, here's this Datejust, $6,000 for a vintage Datejust. I'll be like, no, sorry, not interested. And they're almost surprised that I'm completely not interested. They're like, aren't you going to like negotiate? I said, no, I don't want this watch, period. And then they drop the price, 5,000, 4,000. I'm like, I have no interest in this watch at any price. Like I do not want to touch this watch. And they like have, and I think only then is there some kind of awakening that wherever they got it from is maybe the wrong place.
Oh man, God, that's got to be awkward. One thing I do want to pick at is you mentioned Cartier earlier,
Yes.
and I think you and a handful of other people have been behind this like Cartier boom. What happened? Like, why was Cartier slept on so much, and why is it so hot right now?
I think, I mean, there's a lot of reasons. First of all, people were definitely hyping it up before me, like some of these like real psychotic Cartier collectors on Instagram, definitely before me. So I want to give like those people credit, like George Kramer, Roni Madvani, Eric Hu, like these people well before me.
Okay.
I think that people are tired of big watches. I think anyone paying attention are seeing the, big watches drop in relevance. And, people are also sick of maybe Rolex, modern Rolex, like the games you need to play to get these watches. And they see that these like historic, beautiful, iconic watches from Cartier are relatively available compared to a Nautilus. And I think people just started paying attention to them. And, they're also extraordinarily collectible. And when I tell people with Cartier, there's a lot of treasure hunting involved that doesn't really exist with Rolex. You're not going to find a Rolex in a totally new style that no one's ever seen before. It's not going to happen. But with Cartier, it's you can walk into a random jewelry shop and maybe they'll have some piece from 1960s London Cartier that there's no photographs of on the internet, that nothing is ever, that no one even really knew existed, because so much stuff was coming out in such small quantities in the 50s, 60s, 70s that there's a lot of stuff like undiscovered still. And it's not like Rolex where you could look at the serial and figure out what year it is. It doesn't really work like that. So, and also someone, again, in like a small jewelry shop somewhere might get, a tank in, like someone brings in a gold tank. They're okay, this is a gold Cartier tank. It's worth $7,000. That's what it's for sale for. But then someone walks in and says, okay, I know that this is like a 1940s Cartier. It says France on the dial. It's actually a tank normal and it's worth 60 grand. Like that's not going to happen really with Rolex anymore. We're beyond the point where, I mean, with Rolex, someone who knows nothing about Rolex can Google what's on the dial or the engravings and figure it out. There's almost no way to do that with Cartier. So there's like this big treasure hunting aspect. And like, new stuff is kind of being discovered all the time. There's watches that they maybe made 5 of in the 70s, and, tracking down this information, there's no databases of serial numbers. So just from a collector standpoint, that I think is highly interesting. It's also a thing where it's like it's closer to jewelry. I mean, it's a brand where the movements are not super important. It's really the aesthetics, the design, the shapes. Like that's the important part.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of a response to like people getting ultra obsessed with movements and complications. And this is like in chronographs, and this is like the polar opposite of that.
Yeah.
I also think they're just very beautiful, and they're still obtainable for fairly reasonable prices. And I just think it's very interesting. And they have this NSO program, new special order, where you can certain people are invited to kind of design their own Cartier, their own special dial, essentially a one of one. And that's not something you really see with like Rolex, or definitely not Rolex, but watch brands used to do that back in the day, but really you don't really see that anymore. So that's another really like interesting thing that collectors are into.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I mean, I've talked to other people about Cartier in the past, and I don't think anyone's put it the way you did in terms of the treasure hunting aspect. Because like you're right, there's a lot of stuff where it's somewhat easy to find the history or the lineage or the reference. Do you think we're in this like post-movement world of like watch collecting? Because I feel like people care less and less about what caliber is this and what, other than to
I think the majority of collectors never really cared about that. Maybe they want to say their watch has an in-house movement, but in the end, like, do they really, really care about that? I mean, I was never obsessed with movements to begin with. I think you're always going to have the independent watchmakers where that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Voutilainen, FP Journe, stuff like that, where that is paramount. But when you look at something like Cartier, it's really like you're looking for a beautiful object that you can wear, and it keeps time well. Great. The movements are still historic. Like you have the EWC movements, the Le Coultre movements. I mean, there's still like Piguet movements. They're still important movements. They're just not necessarily in-house. And I think most collectors truly don't really care about that. They might say they do, but I can't imagine that they truly care. If like, I mean, for many years, Rolexes didn't use they did Zenith movements or Valjoux or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's like, it's the thing you're going to see the least of on your watch is the movement. So I'd rather have a beautiful tungsten tray or Cartier crash on my wrist than, a split second chronograph. Though I do find those interesting too.
Yeah. Is that still the grail? Like a crash or something?
I used to think the crash, I still think the crash is kind of like overexposed. It's the ultimate like mood board watch. Like all these like Instagram accounts that they just like steal other people's content and just like, you swipe through. And it's like, oh, it's a 60s 911. Then it's like a bronze stereo. And then it's like a Cartier crash. And it's like, it's a watch you like, that's how people know it. People don't know about watches asking about the Cartier crash. And then I got to wear one for 2 weeks. And I was like, damn. I picked it up for a dealer colleague from one of his clients. He just needed me to hold on to it he's like, you could wear it too. I don't care. So I was wearing this thing. It was the 1991 version, which is actually a little bit smaller than the one they technically make today. And I was just wearing it around. And my God, I was like, this thing is amazing. And to think they've only probably made less than every version of the crash, probably less than 1,000 total. So it truly is limited. How many Nautiluses they've probably made like, God, over 100,000, less than
at least.
Less than 1,000 Cartier crashes. And even today, it's probably easier to get a Tiffany signed Patek than it is to get a Cartier crash. I think they release one watch per month. And obviously it's not just going to the case to see who can get to it first. It's going to like extraordinarily good clients probably. I would love to get my hands on one someday, but for retail. So, I promote.
Yeah. Cause what is retail on a crash? Maybe now? It's not
probably like,
right?
I don't know, maybe low 30,000 range, which is still a lot of money, but it's worth 200,000. I would love to be able to get one day. I promote Cartier a lot. I've probably given them a lot of free press. I just did something I did a video for Hypebeast where it's a video just about the Cartier crash where they interviewed me. I talk about it a lot. It would be nice to get one day.
Are there any like watch brands that, like maybe are worthless to others, but mean everything to you?
I don't know about that. I don't know. Do you mean just underappreciated brands or what do you mean?
Yeah. I guess cause for me, I've always loved vintage Seikos and a lot of people are like, that's, it's not really the first thing someone mentions when they collect vintage watches, but I liked it because it was easy to get, it was easy to understand. And even to this day, I have maybe 20 vintage Seikos that maybe are worth, I don't know, 30% more than what I paid for it. But it's not like I don't have anything that's, oh man, this is like the equivalent of a crash or this is but that's like always been just one of my favorite things, even though they're not as hot.
Yeah, there's brands like that are like Gallet is one, Universal Genève is one.
Oh, yeah.
Collectors love this stuff for sure. So it's not like someone's giving it away. But yeah, there's definitely smaller brands that I like for sure.
I know like a lot of people got into Enicar.
Yeah, Enicar's cool for sure. Like Wittnauer is cool. Like there's a lot of like really Minerva. There's a lot of cool old brands that I like.
Yeah, the fact that like I remember seeing old Movado Dr. Dials with the little squiggle.
Old Movado is amazing.
And now, I remember seeing them as like $2-3 grand for one. I was like, man, that's a lot for a Movado. And now like that same watch, they're going for like 20.
Yeah, like a Super Sub C or something could go for close to 20. Yeah, there's really, really rad stuff in Movado's history.
It's definitely pretty crazy. One of the other things I wanted to definitely chat with you about is like, as you kind of evolve in this TikTok world, like has anyone like approached you to do like a TV show or do you see any sort of like maybe longer term video series that you're going to do? Or?
No. Actually, not really.
Because there are people that put your videos on YouTube, like all stitched together.
Yeah, I believe it. People say you should do YouTube. I don't know. It's like hard enough for me to get myself to do one TikTok video, which doesn't require much editing every day. Then if I have to worry about YouTube, God, and start from scratch. There's just so much watch content on YouTube already. That there's relatively barely any.
But it's not
TikTok.
Entertaining. I'm going to push back, like, because I think people like Teddy Baldessari and all that stuff. It's really cool. It's very informative, but it's also, it's not deep. And that's no shots to him. Like, I'm not as entertained. Maybe that's the better way to say it. Like watching your stuff, I have to delete TikTok from my phone at times because an hour and a half goes by and I've just watched all these, videos of what's on people's wrist or your clapbacks at weird people DMing you.
Yeah.
It's there's much more entertaining with that. And so, just as a fan, I'd love to see like the day in the life TV show, but
well, if anyone's out there from Netflix or HBO, let me know.
So a lot of times on your TikToks, you're responding to people who ask you the same questions over and over again. What are the questions that people are always asking you that you can answer here to kind of reduce the influx of DMs.
Okay, probably my most frequently asked question, and this is coming from people who I'm assuming are also following like Gary Vee and Joe Rogan.
Uh-oh.
She's like, how do I flip watches? Like, how do I get into this? Like I want to do this. I have $1,000 to start. I tell everybody, study watches like you're in college. Study them until you are an expert. And then once you're an expert, you won't be able to stop yourself from making money because it should come very naturally. If you were trying to get into this and flip it like Nike or Supreme or Pokemon cards, you are going to get burned, and I will enjoy watching it.
Yeah, there's no catalog raison of any watches, are there?
No, basically not.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm not saying it's impossible. I did it. Someone else can do it. But if you're trying to do it with no knowledge and no like love of watches, just because you see this on TikTok and it looks easy, like I would love for you to try. I know dudes who are just like, who know a decent about watches and just, are just kind of like inept on social media, who like I see struggling. Like we were in the Miami Beach Antique Show, which is a huge show, not just for watches, but for, all different like antiques in the Miami Beach Convention Center. It's like a 500,000 square feet or something. And there's all the big watch dealers are there. And someone else was like, man, like kind of it's a rough year for like selling vintage watches, huh? And we're like, no, not for like, this has got to be like, we can't even keep stock in. Like maybe if you are like only posting like ultra high like quality photos with overly verbose captions that only appear to like appeal to boomers on your TikTok once a week, I would imagine it's hard to move watches. If you can speak to people in their own language and you're kind of like teaching and not only dealing with like the most seasoned collectors, but make it kind of welcoming to newbies as well. You have to like also trust so much of it. Like I have a decent sized platform. You think I'm going to risk it all to sell you a bad watch? If someone DMs me and they have a great watch they want to sell and I don't know who this person is, they're sending me the watch first. And if you're not comfortable with that, then we're not making a deal. You think I'm going to scam you with all this? Like, even beyond the TikTok, there's Craft and Taylor, there's my Instagram account, there's like all my personal information, Cameron's, it's like, you think we're going to risk this to screw you out of your grandfather's watch? We're not. And I think if you're just some guy with a new Instagram account or a new TikTok account, I think you're also not going to have that, which is kind of like a big important aspect of this as well. Also, you need like a resale certificate, you need a tax ID, you probably want to be a member of IWJG, which is like the Watch and Jewelers Guild, which all the major dealers are a part of. It's not super easy. Listen, if you're able to get a Daytona at retail, please, by all means, flip it for double or triple. More power to you. But like, don't get confused as to think that's how things are regularly going to go for you.
Right.
So that's probably the most asked question is, how do I do this?
That's great advice. One of the things I noticed you I don't know if you've always been collecting these, but at least you're telling other people that is auction catalogs.
Yes, I love the auction catalogs. I that's literally what the microphone is sitting on. Like these old auction catalogs, that's what my microphone's sitting on right now. I think this is an amazing source of information. It's, stuff that's not on the internet. There's no photos of some of these watches on the internet. So if you're only relying on what Google image search is going to bring up, you're missing decades of information. Also, it's sometimes you'll get a watch and you're thinking, okay, is this, not a Rolex, something even more obscure. Sure. And you're thinking like, is this real? Is this all correct? Then you got to think like, who would be faking this? Who would be spending the time to cast a fake gold case to make a fake galet or something like who's doing this? So within the same idea is like, you can look back at these catalogs from the 80s when the subs were $500. Was there the appeal of like faking this when you could buy them so easily? There were so many of them laying around. So basically you could look through these catalogs and say, okay, this is what this watch is probably supposed to look like in an untouched state. Like there was the controversy at Phillips over the Cartier crash, the London crash from late December, where at the last minute someone revealed that it may have been a forgery. The person who consigned the watch to Phillips says they bought it from Sotheby's in the 90s. So now I'm, looking through every single catalog from the 90s looking for that watch. And had I found it, which I didn't, but only because I don't have all the catalogs, that would have been a very, very, very important piece of information one way or another, whether it was real or fake, for them to say, we got it from Sotheby's in the 90s. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to find that. I think, there's, again, it's not on the internet. It's only in these catalogs. I've been buying them on eBay, buying them where I can find them. I'm probably missing, I'd love to have everyone from like the 80s on, but I probably have 100 of them. There's probably
Oh my
500 more
God.
than I
Yeah,
need.
that's like a ton. I remember at one point I had like 4 huge boxes filled with
Yeah.
free and easy magazines because I would just
Yeah.
collect so much old print stuff, and my wife made me junk them all. Which even I remember I'd spent probably thousands
Wow.
with that many free and easy mags, and I left them outside of my building in just the trash heap because it was too heavy
Yeah.
to even carry. It was such a shit show. But like
Yeah.
all those catalogs are gold. I mean,
Yeah.
it's incredible.
Mhm.
Damn, was there anything that you saw that you're like that?
Oh yeah, there was like Tiffany signed Paul Newman lemon dials, like the craziest combination of things you could imagine. What's funny is even the Cartier crash was still 30 grand in the early 90s or whatever. So it was always selling for a lot.
Oh
There
wow.
were what's funny is, and people, I think Nick Fox says that like in the 80s there was like a big collector boom of Cartier. And what's funny is I look at some of the old Cartier items and they're only back at that price now, 30 or 40. Like, for example, like like a tungsten tray might have been like, today maybe you're paying 40 grand or something. It depends which era, but say it's 40 grand. If I look at a catalog from the 80s, it's like 38. It's like there really was like this big collector's boom way, way, way back. And it's only now re-catching up to that as well. So it's pretty
Wow.
funny to see some of these, because you'll see subs, you'll see Paul Newman Daytonas for $1,500 or $2,000, but you'll see, Tank Normal, like the one Jackie Onassis wore, which was, it still might have been 10 grand back in the
Yeah.
80s. So it wasn't like it was super cheap back then. Rolexes
Yeah,
were, however.
that's something I still think is so nuts where, a friend of mine, his dad collected Rolex, and the thing he always says is he was like, it never costs what it truly costs now. And you've done this too on your TikTok of like calculating like what it would have cost for inflation. Yeah. He's like, you're not going to have, he's like, I don't know what company is going to give people, because he ran like it wasn't like Dow Chemical, but they sold cleaning supplies. And okay. Basically all of his execs got like Datejust, and on the back, and he was like, it was a lot of money at the time, but it was still not, he's like, if I were to buy all my execs Datejust now, he's like, Datejust like $8 grand or $9 grand. But he was just like, he's like, I bought 10 watches. I just went in, I said, could I get 10? And they put it on the dial, and it was like, a few $100 each. That's still to me like just the craziest of how much those have gone up. And the fact that like people, like, they're just not rare. There's nothing rare about a Rolex. And I say it as an idiot who will continue to basically only buy Rolex. I mean, it's just, it's I don't know.
It's like another question people ask me all the time is, what's the best watch to invest in? I always tell people these are not investments. You should be glad that we have a hobby we could participate in where your money doesn't go down the drain the second you buy something. Like, just be grateful that maybe you can get your money out of it, let alone an investment. I don't talk about watches like that almost ever. And it's like, it seems like that's all people care about, like, whatsoever, is like, what's a good investment? I don't know. Go buy the S&P 500. I don't know what to tell you.
An index fund is still better. I mean, even what was it? I won't mention his name, but there was a dealer who started a hedge fund style.
Yeah, there's more than one of those, I think.
And it's obviously has not been the best investment.
I mean, imagine like buying a Nautilus for an investment purpose when it was $200,000 like over a year ago, or a year and a half ago. I mean, those people probably don't think think it was a very good investment. I think it's a good investment if you can get it at retail. Then it's an investment of 12 hours later you could sell it for quadruple. That's a good investment if you have access to them at retail.
I woke up once to a text this year, or maybe it was late last year, from a friend, and it was like all caps, and they wrote like, Kirkland, you fucking idiot. Like, I had just bought a GMT, and I had heard about you got a GMT. So I got one too. And by my calculations, is what they wrote, it should be worth $40,000 to $50,000 now. And I was like, first off, I didn't tell you to buy the watch. Yeah. Second, but he was so pissed at me because he had bought it for, I think he bought it for like 35, and you can't, I mean, no one's buying a GMT.
That's the reason why I never, again, I can't imagine like telling every customer that comes in, this is a great investment, this is going to go up. Like, how would have you even survived the last year? Luckily, with vintage, we haven't seen. I mean, people will also comment, another frequently asked question, like, do you think the market's going to go down further? I'm like, well, it really hasn't done much for vintage, and that's the only market I care about. I don't deal with or care about or pay attention to modern Rolex, period. There was like a little dip in vintage, but at collector grade, at museum grade, there's no dips. So I have no idea what's going on with, like, I don't know what a modern GMT really costs today. I don't know what a Hulk costs really. Yeah. So, it's also, an infinite resource. They could make as many of these as they want tomorrow. Like tomorrow, Patek could be like, oh, we're quadrupling production on the Nautilus. We're going to flood the market with Nautiluses. So yeah, who knows? I mean, that's one of the reasons why I like vintage. It's a very extraordinarily finite resource.
Yeah, I'm still a little too scared to get into vintage outside of, and not that I don't trust anyone, but it's like, I don't know. Like, I mean, yeah, we've talked about Cartier stuff where I'm like, yeah, like maybe I should get a Cartier. Maybe I should do it. And it's just like,
it is a minefield if you don't have someone good guiding you. There's like Cartier has been extraordinarily counterfeited over the years.
Yeah, and I don't even know what I like because everyone's always like, well, what is the stuff that you like? I mean, I tried on your watch. I've tried. I will say I'm so fickle. Even though like I always pretend I'm a very nice person, there's like 5 different people, and the second they get something, I'm like, it's over. And this, a bunch of them have been like, oh, dude, I just got a sick tank.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I can't get a tank now because you're a clown.
That's funny. Yeah. I mean, it's like when there's only a handful of important models they make, then like everyone is going to have like a tank or something. Luckily, it is like extraordinary. It's like a sub. It's like extremely iconic. Also, that's why I made it a point to, all my Cartiers have like something pretty unique about them that's kind of hard to tell, at first glance.
Oh, yeah. For sure. Well, Mike, this has been a joy, a pleasure. Very, very grateful for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much, man. It was great to have you on.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You've been listening to Blammo. Our show is produced by Blammo Media. We're edited by Amar Lal, and our theme music, as always, by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. If you like what you heard, share the pod with a friend. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, I don't know, whatever it is. Follow us on Instagram for all the hot content. And if you want to talk to us and give us your hot take, we'd love to hear from you. Send us an email at info@blammopod.com, and we'll put it in a show or something. I don't know. Last but not least, if you want to hang out with us or join the Blam fam, visit patreon.com/Blammo, where we have tons of exclusive episodes, exclusive shows, and our amazing Slack community. All right, folks, see you soon.